Hello everyone and welcome to State of Legal AI 2025. I'm Emma Millington from LexisNexis and I'll be chairing today's session. We have a fantastic panel with us today. Andrew Telling, Head of Knowledge at Taylor Wessing, Jacob Turner, Barrister at Fountain Court Chambers, Alex Galtieri, Deputy General Counsel at Colt, and Sandra Smyth, Head of Knowledge Management at Farrer & Co. They bring perspectives from private practice, the bar, in-house, and law firm innovation. Before we dive into their insights, let's set the stage with some key findings from LexisNexis's brand new AI Culture Clash report. The numbers tell a striking story. Nearly 2/3 of UK legal professionals now use AI for work, a leap up from 46% at the start of the year. For a profession known to be cautious, that's a huge acceleration in just 9 months. Yet, here's the reality check. Only 17% say AI is fully embedded in their firm's strategy and operations. Most others are inching forward. 39% told us we're experimenting, but progress is slow. And about 1 in 5 admit to serious hesitation or lack of engagement. 19% have interest, but little investment. And another 18% are either fearful or not even discussing AI at all. In short, AI adoption is rising fast, but firm culture is lagging behind. So why the cultural lag? Trust and confidence appear to be big factors. Over 3/4 of lawyers worry about inaccuracies, the dreaded AI hallucinations. Nearly half are concerned about relying too much on AI and losing their own judgment. So while curiosity about AI is high, confidence in it is still shaky. In fact, only 11% of lawyers using AI say they rely on it heavily day to day. The vast majority are dabbling or using it sparingly. They're interested, but not ready to bet the farm on it yet. One reason for caution is that many lawyers feel they're venturing into this new tech with limited support. Only 24% say their organisation has given them proper training to use AI safely, and just 28% have a clear, easy-to-follow AI policy at their workplace. Think about that. 3/4 of lawyers are essentially figuring out AI on their own without guidance or guardrails. That's a recipe for anxiety. It's no wonder that building trust is crucial. Encouragingly, the survey found confidence in AI jumps when it's tied to authoritative sources. 71% of all lawyers and 88% of regular AI users feel more confident using AI that's grounded in trusted legal sources. In a risk-averse field like law, showing your AI's work and sources is key to earning trust. Quality and credibility of the tools matter. Now let's talk about how AI is actually being used. The impact of AI on lawyers' time is already visible. In private practice, many lawyers are seizing AI's efficiency to work smarter and harder. 56% of AI-using lawyers in firms say they spend the time saved by AI on more billable work. At the same time, a similar 53% report that AI is helping them achieve a better work-life balance. Yes, that's right. Half are using AI to bill more, and another half are using it to live more. And in-house lawyers lean even more towards the quality of life angle. 52% of in-house counsel say they use AI's time savings to improve work-life balance over other benefits. So AI isn't just a productivity tool, it's also becoming a well-being tool depending on your environment. The business of law is feeling the AI effect too. Billing models, for example, might be on the cusp of change. In January, 40% of lawyers thought AI would change how firms bill clients. Just a few months later, that jumped to 47%. Nearly half of the profession now expects AI to transform billing, whether through alternative fee arrangements, faster turnarounds reducing billable hours, or new pricing for AI-assisted services. And if all of that isn't enough to get law firms to pay attention, consider this. AI adoption has become a talent and retention issue. Nearly 1 in 5 lawyers, 18% in private practice and 19% in corporate legal teams, say they would consider leaving their organisation if it doesn't invest in AI. In the biggest firms, this jumps to 26%. Lawyers, especially younger ones, don't want to be stuck at an outdated firm. They worry they'll fall behind in their careers. So embracing AI isn't just about efficiency or hype, it's about keeping your best people and staying competitive in the market. That's why this conversation today is so important. AI in law is here, it's real, and it's moving fast, but it's also raising tough questions. How do we bridge the gap between rapid adoption and slower cultural change? How do different corners of the legal industry, big firms, boutique firms, barristers' chambers, in-house departments, diverge in their AI journeys? What risks should we worry about, and how do we manage them? And ultimately, how do we turn all of these insights into practical steps for our 2026 strategy? Over the next hour, our panel will unpack these questions. We'll explore why AI use is accelerating and what's driving their growth. We'll compare how a law firm versus a chambers versus a corporate team is adopting AI. We'll discuss the risks and concerns keeping lawyers up at night, and we'll look at what comes next, how AI might change the way we work, bill, and deliver value in 2026 and beyond. So that's the backdrop. Fast adoption, but a clear confidence and culture gap. Before we get started, let me introduce our fantastic panel. 4 people right at the heart of how AI and knowledge are transforming legal work. First, Andrew Telling, Head of Knowledge Management at Taylor Wessing. Andrew leads the firm's knowledge, know-how, and legal training strategy and sits on its AI Delivery Excellence Board. A former corporate and M&A lawyer, he is now driving how knowledge, innovation, and generative AI shape the way lawyers work and deliver advice. Next, Jacob Turner, barrister at Fountain Court Chambers and one of the UK's leading voices on AI and law. A former solicitor advocate, Jacob focuses on technology, data, and AI cases. He is recognised by Chambers and Partners as a global market leader for AI, featured in the Lawyers Hot 100 2025, and acted in the landmark AI inventor case, Thaler against the Controller of Patents in the Supreme Court. He is also author of Robot Rules, Regulating Artificial Intelligence, and a contributing author to the Law of Artificial Intelligence. Then we have Alex Galtieri, Deputy General Counsel and Group Data Protection Officer at Colt. Alex oversees corporate law, governance, and data protection across Colt's global operations. He has worked with Hexagon, the European Space Agency, and Interroute Communications, and he is qualified in England, Ireland, and Italy. He is also a chartered governance professional, a chartered manager fellow, an ODI certified data ethics professional, and holds an MBA from Holt Business School. And finally, Sandra Smyth, Head of Knowledge Management at Farrer & Co. Sandra drives the firm's strategy for knowledge, information, and emerging technologies. With over 2 decades in legal knowledge and innovation, including at Michigan de Rea, she has led major automation and AI-driven projects and plays an active role shaping the profession through BL and the National Apprenticeship Trailblazer Group for knowledge and information professionals. So across private practice, chambers, in-house and firm leadership, this panel brings an extraordinary range of experience. They are innovators, thinkers and doers, and we could not ask for a better group to explore how AI is changing the legal profession. So we've seen adoption of AI accelerate dramatically this year, but culture and confidence haven't kept pace. The question is, what's driving the uptake and why are so many firms still stuck in experimentation mode? So if I turn to Andrew to start with, adoption has jumped from 46 to 61% in months. What do you think is behind this acceleration from your perspective in private practice?
I definitely think there's been a maturing of the market, as you say, over that period. I think people have moved from wait and see in 23-24 into implementation this year. And that's partly because the offerings have got better defined. I think people have understood better more recently what the skills, in inverted commas, are that AI brings and what they can be used for. And also things like user interface and integrations have got better as well. So taking all those things together, I think IT departments and firms have been ready to take the plunge this year in adoption and implementation, whereas they weren't before. I think we're going to come on to the problems with the speed of adoption, and I think there's an awful lot to say about that. But the basic backdrop is now people have moved into that stage of trying to implement.
And if I turn to Alex, do you think it's different for them, an in-house perspective?
Not really. Maybe some of the drivers are slightly different in that law firms are looking at a maybe smaller set of comparators in terms of the firms that they perceive to be peers, whilst multinationals such as Colt tend to have different sort of data points, including customers and suppliers. So it's sort of part of an ecosystem, and you get different parts of the organization being exposed to different uses of AI by these different sort of counterparts and stakeholders. It could be procurement, it could be finance, etc. So the difference for us is that it's very much not just about legal AI and the legal department. Is much more looking at this more as anything that could feed into an enterprise solution. Could be a point-based legal AI tool, but the real question is, will it help the whole organization? Because frankly, the legal department is usually one of the smallest functions in a large organization such as Colt, and the business case for saying let's do this because it just makes this very small group of people more efficient doesn't really stack up. If we can demonstrate that it changes, for instance, the time for contracting, and that means the revenue cycle shortens, that's an argument that is very much more welcomed by the CFOs and the sales director, etc. So for me, is those are sort of slightly different the drivers in the different environment that I live in.
Thanks, Alex. And just turning to Jacob, do you have a different perspective from the bar?
The bar would look at these issues from a slightly different perspective, given that in the UK at least, we're at the self-employed bar individual practitioners. So the advantages in terms of costs that can be shared and benefits that can be experienced across an organisation don't necessarily apply to the same extent as regards barristers. There are, however, two ways that barristers in independent practice might acquire and adopt these tools. One of them is by purchasing individual licenses from the service providers, and another is by collectively purchasing licenses. The latter would usually be at the level of chambers. Now, for individual barristers, the costs of buying an individual license can be quite high. Typically, the AI service providers will supply licenses on the basis of reduced costs for more licenses bought. And so there are economies of scale to buying 100 or 1,000 licenses that you don't get for buying an individual license. And for many practitioners, at least the cost point at the moment will be prohibitive, not in terms of something that they couldn't afford at all, but in terms of the cost benefit analysis. It simply wouldn't make sense for many practitioners to purchase licenses individually, which then leads to the question as to whether from Chambers' perspective as a whole, it will be worthwhile for licenses to be purchased to different resources. In that regard, some chambers are doing it, other chambers are waiting, and in terms of what is being purchased, there are obviously many different options. Some of the tools which are widely available and used by solicitors' firms and by in-house counsel are not necessarily designed for the same types of tasks as those which barristers would be doing. But nonetheless, the underlying technologies are very much capable of augmenting and to some degree replacing what barristers will do. So I would say that overall barristers are probably slightly behind in terms of the adoption curve than the other parts of the legal industry, but there are certain nuances to barristers' practice that lead to that being the case, both in technological terms but also in financial terms.
Thanks, Jacob. And I think we only have, I think it's 17% of organisations have fully embedded AI into their strategy. Sandra, do you think this slow experimentation sort of shows cultural inertia, or do you think it's more, you know, as Jacob's saying, there's sort of financial implications and there are sort of other reasons why we're not embedding it as quickly?
I think definitely expense is probably an issue that we all struggle with in our own ways with the tools. And I think that complexity around generative AI above and beyond any kind of technological implementation we've seen in the past adds to, I think, a caution in potentially embedding AI into strategy straight away. I think we've definitely felt that experimentation that we've been talking about has been needed, and that feedback loop from the lawyers to central business service teams is necessary for being able to fully articulate and understand what our strategy should be. And I think sometimes it has been difficult for both areas of the business to always understand exactly where we need to go. And I think it's not just a law issue. We know that most organizations struggle to show that return on investment that they want to show for their generative AI implementation so far, which I think again feeds into that we can't properly embed it into our strategy until we've really fully tested it out and understood its use cases in that implementation and applications.
And Andrew, do you have a sort of a similar response?
Yes, I mean, I think there are various aspects to this. I mean, one is definitely, financial. I think it is something where there's no defined return on investment a lot of the time. You're striking out in the direction without really knowing where you're going to end up, and therefore you can't really evaluate how much you're going to gain from that. But at the same time, I think senior management are keenly aware, you can't be left behind, and so there is a will to invest. And the question comes kind of invest in what? And the way I see it, it's what we're trying to solve here has to be both bottom down and top up, because it's not like a lot of classic legal tech where you know what it does, you roll it out, you train people and off you go. You train people how to use it, and then they've got to find what it's useful for. And each instance of that turns into its own little mini project, really, where you're working out what it might be good for. You're setting up some way of testing that and evaluating it. And I think what people are finding is you need a whole facilitation layer of people who can help with that. And actually a firm needs to invest in those people. It needs to hire them, it needs to train them, it needs to manage them. And so without that, the danger is that you say, right, here's how it works, off you go. And then you've got a load of really busy Fionas, as Sandra was saying, who actually, most of them just haven't got the time. They need support to do it. They need to be shown in more detail how to do it. So I think there are various different reasons for it. And another one, sort of big picture, is it's still quite early days, really, in rolling this sort of thing out in law firms and finding out what it can do. I'm sure there'll be much more going on this time next year, for example. It's going to take time before people really get their minds around it and get their organizational structures around it as well. Yeah,
I think the learning curve is enormous for us all, isn't it, at the moment? Alex, I could see you nodding along to what Andrew was saying. Is it sort of a similar perspective in-house?
It is, again, if you look at this multiplied by the different functions that exist in a multinational. So yes, you've got people experimenting in procurement, in sales, and etc. But there is definitely a lack of, as Andrew said, a layer of facilitation. It is helpful to train everyone who wants in the use of these tools, and then let them do things that are sort of grassroots, because that could solve their problems, the daily problems. So the idea is then to identify those and replicate them across, so that people can share experiences and identify ways, for instance, of simplifying, automate workflows that are similar in different parts of the organization. One difference, I think, that really strikes me between law firms and in-house is that if I look at we'll be discussing tools later on, but if you look at the data sources of the tools that are now being used by law firms, is a very well curated data set of trusted content. We don't have the luxury, or we could if we bought an off-the-shelf solution just for legal, which, as I said, is not necessarily the way forward. So one of the things that we struggle with is data quality. You very soon realize that regardless of the relentless march of progress of these tools, as Andrew mentioned, they are getting better literally every month. The reality is that with poor data quality, you're not going to have the quality of the output that you hope. And so a lot of organizations have always had suspicions about the quality of the data in their systems. Now that they're thinking, can we leverage the historical data to get these outcomes, they realize that actually the data is pretty poor. So that's one element that is in my world stopping a lot of organizations across the board of every size to fully embrace some of these solutions, because the solution may be perfectly fit for purpose, provided it's fed with the training materials that is trustworthy, which unfortunately you cannot be completely sure, including in some cases a lot of legacy data that was never used again and so was never validated.
Yeah, it's the dreaded hallucinations, isn't it, and the risk of it. Sort of continuing with that, so how do you think in-house firms can balance that need to experiment with the need for tangible results and sort of benefits from using the AI?
For the in-house world, you mean? Well, a little bit what I was saying about training people, giving them the tools, and then letting them discover what it is that works for them. So Colt is rolling out Copilot to everyone in batches. We have a center of excellence that tries to share the best practices. One of the obvious results that we've seen is that even Copilot, arguably one of the largest user base together with ChatGPT, is not as good in other languages than it is in English, just given the sheer size of the training material that's used for the model. So adoption is a bit slowed down by the perception that the tool isn't really that good in other countries. And so we have different views, lawyers in different jurisdictions that work in different jurisdictions at how good the tools really are. So that is definitely a problem. One of the things that I would say is that cross-pollination with other functions is useful. A lot of the, as I say, workflows or solution or little automation tricks that our colleagues in finance use can be repackaged and repurposed really quickly, provided you have champions who do that, see the analogy, and then spend a little bit of time explaining to their colleagues what it has and hasn't worked for them. We have a pretty progressive bunch of people, and we've got some sort of very enthusiastic champions. But it is very much an old story. The adoption of legal tech by lawyers is hindered not about the fact that lawyers are necessarily conservative, I believe personally, but the fact that we have got a really, really high threshold for product quality. And so if we think that the tools cannot do this at this level, then I'm not going to touch it again. And what I've been trying to say, what I've been encouraging my colleagues to think differently about this, is to say, imagine that it's a really bright junior, that is a trainee or really junior associate. You wouldn't expect them to get everything right, but it's someone who learns. And so if you spend some time doing this sort of oversight, it will get better and better, exactly as a bright junior will. So with that slight shift, with that sort of metaphor, that seems to have helped, because people have got a bit more patience and they don't expect the tool to immediately develop results with a magic wand, but they understood that the more they put in, the more the tools will become helpful in the long run. And that has been quite effective.
Perfect, thank you. And sort of building on what Alex has said, Jacob, which sort of parts of legal work are seeing sort of the fastest AI adoption?
I can speak with experience, or at least individual experience, from the bar's perspective. So I'll do that first, and then I'll perhaps broaden that out into a little bit of what I'm seeing from my various clients in the legal industry and elsewhere. So from the bar's perspective, the uptake is generally at the moment focused on the legal research tools, which are able to synthesize answers to natural language questions. Find me a case where X has happened. Can I have some authorities that deal with point Y? And the traditional providers of legal resources, such as Westlaw and LexisNexis, of course, are already integrating those sorts of tools into their database searches. There are also specialist companies which are also offering AI first versions of that. One that has had some uptake across the market is called Kanuni, spelled with a Q, but there are various others, including for specific areas of law. For example, there are specific competition law LLMs or large language models that can be acquired, and also there are specific arbitration law ones. So we're seeing both general and specific models being developed that assist in legal research, and from the bar's perspective, that is very much within the core of what we do, being given a novel and potentially a difficult legal question and then seeking to come to some kind of satisfactory answer to it. The areas that are less widely being adopted at the bar are more those which deal with the reviews and computations of very large document repositories and libraries. So tools like Legora and Harvey, which are extremely good at dealing with enormous corpuses of information and showing you anomalies or deriving particular inferences from those sets of technologies. That is not, as far as I'm aware at the moment, something that the bar is tending to purchase immediately, partly because of the cost issue that I mentioned earlier, but also partly because of our role in the legal value chain. It doesn't tend to be the bar that is handling those enormous numbers of documents. That would normally be something that solicitors or the underlying businesses and in-house counsel at businesses would be dealing with. So for a variety of reasons, those sorts of tools are not necessarily widely being used at the bar as things stand. Moving more broadly to what I'm seeing in terms of clients, I'm conscious that the other panel members of the call will be better able to speak to this than I. But for what it's worth, there seems to me to be very strong uptake for all of the major law firms, as the results of your survey have already shown, of some of the core legal tools for example, Harvey and Ligora, although there are others, as well as non-legal tools like the Copilot suite, which can just be used for a variety of business and other activities that are not necessarily law focused, but need to be done in any business, including a law firm or including a institution with a significant in-house function. And looking forward, I anticipate that as more litigation-focused tools are developed, and some have already been created, for example, Wexler, which creates chronologies for the purposes of litigation. As more litigation-focused tools are developed, I think there will be a greater uptake at the bar of those litigation-focused tools, given that that is one of our core areas of practice.
Thanks, Jacob. And sort of building on this, the data shows striking contrasts in how different parts of the professions are approaching AI, with firms, chambers, in-house teams each taking their own path. So I think it would be good to explore what the differences tell us about culture, priorities, and risks. So turning to Sandra, why do you think law firms are leaning more towards legal-specific AI tools than chambers or corporates?
I think for us, there's a number of benefits from those legal specific tools. Where it's already had the fine tuning for law, it means that we can have more confidence in the results. You get to a good result faster. I think there are areas of the tasks that we're using generative AI to undertake where it's just necessary to have those legal tools. So as Jacob has already said, around legal research, you need to know where the content and the data is held, and therefore you will be dealing with those legal focused vendors. I think especially over the last 6 months, we've seen brilliant developments from those legal specific tools where they're really building them around the workflows and the understanding of how lawyers in private practice work. All of those things obviously just aid with adoption and also confidence in using, cautious confidence in using their results. I think also as well, speaking from a perspective as a central business team, you're getting really excellent support from those vendors. The vendors understand they have brought in people who have worked in private practice, who have a great understanding around those workflows and how lawyers perceive value and how they are able to adopt and change. And they are willing to give very good support around those kind of pilots. And actually being able to do pilots has become more something that they're willing to explore. So I think that's also an additional benefit around the tools are getting better, they're really good, they've got the content and the data that we need, and then we're also getting excellent vendor support on adoption and engagement and how to kind of measure the metrics of success from those pilots and move to adoption and rollout.
Perfect. And sort of building on that, Andrew, do you think there's a risk that over-reliance on AI could de-skill parts of the profession? And is there something we can do to help avoid that?
Well, I'm agnostic on that point, actually. I think over the last few decades, technology has produced a lot of shortcuts, ways of getting things done more quickly. And what we've always had to do as lawyers is retain the discipline when we need to, of going back to the black letter law, of going back to the statute, the regulations, the case law, etc. And I don't think that's going to change. I think training will definitely evolve with AI, and there may be a bit more experiential type training, case study, role play type training, for example. But I think what we've seen so far over the last few decades is that we're a pretty adaptable, savvy bunch, and embrace things which make the job quicker and easier, without necessarily needing to go back and learn how to do it as if those tools weren't there. But I think one other thing I would say is that we've talked about accuracy and hallucinations and the like, but I think there's another side to using AI, which is a kind of lack of edge. You get a generic answer, an answer which is broadly right, but maybe doesn't give salience to the right issues. It's not sufficiently nuanced, and so it's still, I think, for some time yet, going to be the lawyer's role to pick up what you've been delivered by AI, and then giving it that edge that you need to give the most incisive advice to the client, to get the best marketing collateral out, that really gets people sitting up to listen. So I think it's going to be a while yet before all those skills are readily available using AI.
Thanks, Andrew. And Alex, do you have a different perspective in-house?
No, I have a very similar perspective, but maybe let me just go a little bit further. You say this skill. Depends which skills we're talking about, which skills we think may be lost there because tasks have been taken over by AI. Now, if you look at large language models, if you look at the Gen AI tools that we can use, then one of the what Andrew says about the answer being maybe generic is absolutely true. But if you provide the model with a context window and you say, look, this is the question, but I want an answer that is tailored for this audience, keeping in mind these assumptions and keeping in mind this data set, then the answer would be much more useful. And for me, as a client, if you allow me the slightly facetious comparison, a context window is exactly what great law firm partners or great private practice lawyers have always had, their ability to understand what's relevant to the client and not provide what the law says or 20 pages of the intricacies of, particular point of insurance law, but to see, look, this is what's important to you, your factual circumstances, your business, your risk appetite, your history with this particular counterpart. All of these were factoring that makes me think that. Now, they don't verbalize that. I know that partner, I trust them because I know that they have all this background information. So great partners have always had the context window, and conversely, the lawyers who've only been technically excellent at the law, in my experience, have never been particularly satisfactory as partners in both senses, for the firm and for me as a client, because they might have been excellent at the law, but they didn't appreciate which parts of the law was important to me at that particular moment. And so the context window is that humans have, I think, will be always vastly superior to what you can provide in a specific question or series of questions to a model, because there's a lot of knowledge, historical memory, innuendos, body language, all sort of things that humans pick up that LLMs are still pretty far away from. So I think for a while, that's not particularly a risk.
Yeah, and I agree, but sort of with all this experimentation does come some caution and some risks. So I think it would be good now to sort of think about what legal teams are most concerned about at the moment. Is accuracy, over-reliance, training, policy gaps. So I think the main challenge here is how to build trust, manage those risks without slowing down adoption. Andrew, can I come to you with sort of in our report, we had 77% are worried about accuracy, 47% about over-reliance. So how can we prove that AI tools are trustworthy?
Well, I mean, that is a very difficult thing. So I think the thing about Gen AI is it's innately a lot less predictable, a lot more opaque in the way it works than most legal tech we've come across before. So we've got to kind of work out a new way of doing things to address this. So I think having basic AI literacy for everyone who's using it, I think other panel members have already kind of alluded to that, is hugely important. And then, how do you go about testing it? Benchmarking is incredibly time consuming. I think we've all found, the whole thing about trialing AI is the kind of headache of how many days or weeks do you have to, spend actually, testing it. And I think one way of doing it is by keeping a human in the loop, and because that will deal with your accuracy and your context windows, your edge problems, as Alex was referring to. And what you can do is you can use the human in the loop to monitor really how good it is for a particular process. Once you get to a level that you're happy with, then you can lessen your human involvement. That may well be a more practical way than spending ages benchmarking something to just try and release it into the open, without the human on the loop. So it might be a more pragmatic way of doing things. But I will say, on the risk side of things, we've got other risks that we're hugely, concerned about and want to safeguard against, things like data leaks, client information, processing client information in a way that's not permitted, and the accessing internal information in ways which, I suppose it comes down to the same thing, but if you've got information barriers internally, you don't want to have your AI tool come and just willy-nilly cross those information barriers. You've got to be really sure that what you're implementing respects your internal information data governance.
And sort of turning to training, Sandra, in our report, we sort of learnt that only 24% have received training. What do you think effective training should look like?
Yes, and I suspect that, not to want to disagree with any survey respondents, but I suspect more than 24% of the firms are providing training. It's just not training that is effective, and so people aren't engaging with it, or they're not understanding that they've had certain training. I think initially we have to have that leadership support behind the training programs. People have to understand why it's important to engage. Great thing about Gen AI is that you can just go and turn and start using it, and if you haven't shown what best practice is like and the better results you can get if you structure your prompts correctly and are using the right tooling for the right use case, you don't know that you're missing out on something. So I think we absolutely have to have that really clear communication about why it's important to attend training, and then I think we have to have training programs that are varied and meet different people's needs at different times and different learning styles. It's a lot of hard work, but I think that is what is needed to be able to make it so that people start to understand that they have had the training, that they know who they can come to if they need more training, and so that they have the training that they need at the point in time that they need it. And then it needs to be ongoing because it's constantly changing. And my living dread at the minute is being asked to write a QRG on any Gen AI tool, because it will automatically almost be out of date before we've put it out there. So I think it's going to be ever evolving, and I think we have to be prepared for that and understand that people are actually really keen to have training, and so maybe we don't need to worry that, I just gave them this kind of training 6 months ago. I think it's an ever-moving piece, and it needs to keep up with the tools and the use cases and the people that are using it.
Yeah, I think as Alex said, it seems to be every month it's sort of moved on and progressed quite quickly. So continuous training is key. Jacob, from your perspective, do you think chambers are at risk if clients were already ahead of them in AI adoption?
I think it is certainly a risk for chambers in circumstances where, as I've said and as we've seen on this call, many and probably most law firms who are working with chambers are using AI to some degree. They would certainly be justified in expecting chambers to, at the very least, be considering the use of AI, at least where it can reduce the amount of time spent and therefore the amount of fees spent on barristers. And I think just as law firms are experiencing that from lay clients, those pressures will be pushed upwards into the types of work that barristers are doing, especially in circumstances where the AI is sufficiently sophisticated not just to be crunching very large numbers of documents, which barristers will be doing, but also now doing the legal research and increasingly doing the drafting and preparing first cuts of things like statements or even questions for cross-examination, and passing submissions as well as pleadings made by opposing parties and coming up with lines of response. So I certainly think that this is going to be an additional client-driven pressure that is going to hit barristers. And I also think that the more there is publicity around certain barristers' chambers adopting AI tools, which is certainly going on in the background, but isn't necessarily being publicly disclosed, partly for reputational reasons. But at some point, these things are going to hit the headlines for one reason or another, whether it's because of chambers deciding to proactively announce this to the legal press, or it being revealed in the course of proceedings, which are then picked up on by the legal publications. When that happens, that is going to encourage other barristers' chambers to undertake similar steps. The bar is inherently quite a conservative profession at the level of culture, but we do look at what our peers are doing, and we're mindful that our clients look at what our peers are doing. And in order to stay in step with other barristers' chambers, as well as meeting client expectations, I think all of those reasons are going to converge on driving forwards AI adoption at chambers, albeit with a slight lag time from what we're already seeing with law firms.
Thanks, Jacob. And let's finish by looking ahead. The real question is how firms, chambers, and in-house teams move from dabbling with AI to embedding it in strategy. So it would be good to discuss some practical steps leaders should take now to be ready for 2026. Alex, can I start with you on how you think organizations can move from experimentation to embedding AI?
Sure. It is a little bit difficult to provide an answer because, of course, one size does not fit all, and we'll have in the audience organization of many sizes, shapes, and geographical spread. What I can offer is sort of what we're trying to do. There is a clear urgency, a sense from the top that this is a transformational technology that will become part of our lives exactly without even thinking about it, exactly like mobile phones are for my children. And so there is, as I said, the option for everyone. You know, we all have a Copilot license. There is training. There is a centers of excellence are being created to cross-pollinate ideas, and we have a framework so that people can be authorized to use AI. So we have a very comprehensive checklist, I would say that, wrote it, about things to consider. And it's not just legal. There are elements about being compliant with our values, the interests of stakeholders, and not just legal interests, it's just a general sense that this is potentially really, really disruptive technology, and we're using data that we've collected of different quality over decades, and so we need to really be careful what we want to use it for. And then there is an AI operational committee that look at these use cases, and also is one opportunity for people to exchange ideas. And then I'm part of the AI oversight committee, where we have a bit of a broader view to see exactly which area of the organization are developing use cases, plural, that could coalesce to become a whole area that maybe requires investment and focus from senior management, because that could effectively transform the way in which one particular function, could be finance, could be procurement, could be marketing, can change. And so which ones requires restraint, so to speak, and which ones instead actually may need to be pushed a little bit, because they tend to be more conservative and they're not learning from the experience of others. It is very, very different speeds. I'm on the legal working group of UK AI, the Trade Association for AI, and my colleagues in the working group that works in marketing are the ones that, to circle back to the beginning of this conversation, are the ones that had the most widespread adoption, because their ROI was quite clear, producing material and collateral in the space of minutes instead of weeks. But they're exactly the ones that need to really put guardrails on their colleagues' enthusiasm, because the opportunities for the model to go rogue, for copyright infringements, for all sort of things that are wrong, is really bad. So on one hand, we should encourage experimentation, but there should be really clear enterprise-wide, organization-wide guardrails clearly communicated, on which there's training repeatedly offered and then monitored, and reviewing whether that is working for you on a regular basis. Because as the technology evolves, the business cases will evolve, the business uses will evolve. And so whatever we were discussing last year when we set up this framework is still serving us relatively well this year, but I'm making no guarantees for 2026, which is your question. So my only answer is that we'll keep that under constant review, as government press releases say, and we'll see what keeps working in 2026.
Thanks, Alex. And Andrew, with sort of 47% expecting billing models to change, how do you think firms should be preparing for pricing disruption?
I think that it's a very difficult one. I think at one end of the spectrum, you can see subscription models appearing for things which are very much AI powered. Then in the middle, you can possibly see more fixed price for things which are heavily AI powered, where there's a certain amount of legal input. And so maybe you'll be quoting for things on the basis of here's the basis of what we're going to do, which is basically AI powered. But then beyond that, there's quite a lot of bespoke stuff. And I think the way billable hours work at the moment is there's something of obviously a proxy, hopefully for value, but also for time, lawyer time taken, also for overheads of the firm. So they will, to an extent, reflect an AI component. But I think one big thing that billable hours do is they avoid the need to have get tied up in so many assumptions for before you even start a piece of legal work. You can end up you and the client talking for hours and hours to try and work out what all the assumptions might be that define a particular fee level or another fee level. And people say, well, let's just start the work, we'll see how long it takes, and we'll have a conversation, loosely based around the amount of time that you spent doing it. So you might see a hybrid way of doing things where there's a kind of more of an AI fixed price element and then more of a bespoke element built onto that.
Thanks, Andrew. And Sandra, how do you think firms can encourage lawyers and staff to trust and adopt AI responsibly?
I think it's building on a lot of the great things that everyone on the panel has said today about making sure people understand the benefits and the limitations of the tools. I think there has to be that clear message from leadership that this is something we want you to engage with and engage with in a meaningful way so that you understand it. I think effective sharing across teams and up and down levels of seniority is really important. I think people want to see their senior leadership using the tools as well, to have that level of comfort, and to both that it's something that they're allowed to do, but also that their leadership understands the environment they're going to be increasingly operating in. I think it's the right support in the teams at the right time, whether that's done through those facilitation teams that we've spoken about, knowledge lawyers in our case who have been central to our legal tech and Gen AI initiatives. I think it's the correct tools, which may mean having to continually in a central team have an eye as to what's available. And that ongoing training and adoption, nudges and support, and training on the use cases as we become more and more aware of where those use cases are, where the opportunities are for Gen AI to allow us to do more, better. I think we actually will end up training on that rather than necessarily just training on the tools.
Thanks, Sandra. And Jacob, how do you think you can ensure continuous improvement once AI does become part of the strategic fabric?
Practitioners will always need to be looking at what they can better do to assist their clients, regardless of whether that is using AI or not using AI. Ultimately, the aim of dealing with clients and providing answers, as we've heard from Alessandro already, is not necessarily providing the most academic treatise when given a question. It is getting the answer in the format that the client wants to hear, even in circumstances where all of the nuances of that format may not necessarily have been communicated. And part of being a good lawyer is knowing, as Alessandro said, those unspoken points. Now that applies just as much when you're using AI as a tool as it does when you're not using AI. I think increasingly AI will become just as much used as mobile phones, we've already heard mentioned, email, online research tools, all of which, when some lawyers in practice today started working, those were unheard of. Now it would be unheard of not using those things. And I think in 3 to 5 years' time, it will be impossible to think of a situation where you wouldn't use AI in some regard in dealing with a client query. That's already increasingly becoming the case. So the fundamentals of being a lawyer will continue to maintain, as they have done for the last 500 or more years in terms of the legal industry in the UK. But the tools that we use to achieve those fundamentals will adapt. And ultimately, so too must the skill set of lawyers in managing those tools and getting clients what they want.
Thanks, Jacob. And looking at the time, thank you so much to all of our panelists, Andrew, Jacob, Alex and Sandra, for sharing your expertise and for such a thought-provoking and inspiring discussion. I think that's what's really come through today is AI in law is no longer hypothetical. It's happening, it's here, and it's evolving fast. But we're still learning how to bring it fully into the culture of how we work. We've heard how firms are building strategy around AI, how chambers are laser focused on accuracy and trust, and how in-house teams are finding ways to use it for both efficiency and work-life balance. So looking ahead to 2026, the message feels clear. Keep moving from pilots to embedding, train and support your people, set the right guardrails, and keep your focus on quality and client trust. AI is changing how we research, reason, and deliver advice, but it's also reshaping what it means to be a modern lawyer. On behalf of LexisNexis, thank you again to our panelists and to everyone who's joined us today. If you'd like to explore the data in more detail, click the pop-up to download the UK Legal AI Survey Report, or please do book a live demo of our own fantastic legal solution, Lexis Plus AI, to see what trusted source-based AI can do in practice. Thanks for being part of the conversation, and here's to a confident, informed, and thoughtful approach to AI in the year ahead.